Alright, what's going on, everybody? It's Alan Thomas, aka Shado Assassins, and today I'm going to be talking about something that's very rewarding and fun for me, and that is character development and how you can actually build strong characters in your novels, webcomics, comic books, mangas, whatever it is that you're going to do. I don't know why I said comic books and webcomics like they're two different things, but dismiss that. Now, when I talk character development, I'm not touching into character design at all, especially most people that watch my channel are going to be doing like webcomics and comic books and manga. I don't know why I keep lumping comics and webcomics like they're two different things. But anyways, I'm not talking about character design. That's more of the drawing aspect of creating a character, and everybody's style is different. So far be it from me to tell you any tips or how you should or should not be drawing your characters. That's up to you and whatever your style is and the type of story that you want to create. So that's on you. What I'm here to help you with is actually building a character that people care about and want to actually read. You can actually draw probably the greatest looking character that has ever been seen in the history of mankind. However, you could create a character that's strong out of a stick figure and have people care about it. There is a lot of quote unquote bad looking or non-professional looking artwork, trust me, I know, that actually creates characters that people get invested into and care about, that, like I said, technically they don't look like the best drawn things in the world, but there's enough there to actually make you want to come back and keep reading about what this person's going through. The good enough drawing alone is not enough to actually carry a character, but the actual development that you give the character and the backstory that you give it actually can work wonders for you. Now, I've touched on this in an actual video when it came to the process that I used for creating a story previously, but here I just want to dig a little deeper into character development, specifically just to give you guys extra leg up on building your characters in your comics. First things first, obviously you want to have a name for your character. You want to know little things like how old they are, etc., etc. If you can't entirely settle on a name in the beginning, that's okay. I actually will go to names.org and I will start searching up names that are kind of interesting to me and see what I can come up with. A lot of times you'll have ideas for your character or what you want your character to be like, quirks or idiosyncrasies or little powers and stuff that your character may possess. You can actually do an advanced search and sort of search specific words that you want to identify your character with, and it'll actually give you suggestions on names that mean the word you're looking for. For example, you can actually look up God of Thunder and get Raiden as a name. Wonder how the creators of Mortal Kombat went about that process. But in any event, it's a very invaluable tool to use. Now, outside of that, more important things to kind of look up when building a character. Think up little character traits that whoever it is that you're creating may have. Think about little things that actually, or little qualities that makes your character interesting, that will make somebody care about your character, and then think about any type of significant flaws that your character may have. If you can sort of think up little like quirks or odd behaviors that your character may possess, that actually can help, because it's the little things like that that can make your character a little more memorable and help them stand out a little bit more. So those small little details can sort of go a long way. Outside of that, the main habitual expressions that your character may possess, it's a good idea to sort of know, especially if you're doing artwork for a comic book or a manga, what type of facial expressions your character carries on their face the majority of the time in your comic, or what potential expressions may they possess throughout the course of a story. There are tons of different types of facial expressions that people can have, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your character may exhibit all of them in your story. But you need to know the ones that your character may be capable of having, or the ones that bare minimum that they're going to have on a regular basis. So if you have a pretty dark or almost emo-like character that's brooding all the time, you're going to have a pretty stoic or stern sort of face with really intense eyes the vast majority of the time. Maybe even expressions where the character does a lot of talking with their eyes closed. Just little things like that to keep in mind, and you want to keep track of those expressions that your character will possess. Other little things may be little fears that your character may carry along the way throughout your comic. This is very important because it's nice to know the fears that your character may possess so that you know exactly how to put them in danger throughout the course of your story. If you can sort of create fears in your character, that way when your audience is following along on the character's journey, when those fears start to rear its ugly head, your audience can become more invested in the story because they're almost on pins and needles as to how your character is going to get out of the situation they're in, or they can feel almost the angst in the, for lack of a better term, just how afraid the character is in that situation or whatever it is that they're going through. So it's nice to put like things that your character may be afraid of, the little fears that they have in the story or in your character's backstory, just to be aware of little dangers that they may face down the line. Along with this are frustrations that a character may possess. You don't necessarily have to keep track of the things that frustrate a character, but it can't necessarily hurt either. Like I said, these are just little things that you can use to sort of exploit a character over time, and they just create more depth in your character in general. Like I said, you may not need to necessarily go deep into what actually frustrates them, but it can't hurt to give your character added layers in the meantime. Now, another thing that you might want to tap into is your character's emotions. When I say tap into your character's emotions and create the emotions that they'll possess in the story, I mean all of the emotions that your character may be capable of exhibiting. If you do a quick Google search online, you can actually find different charts or images that have lists of emotions on them. The best way that I've come to track this is, and I believe it's a site called EnglishStudyHere.com that has a list of emotions, and they put them in 6 categories, all the different types of emotions for each one, and they are as follows: confusion, sadness, strength, happiness, anger, and energized. Each actual individual criteria has their own list of emotions attached to them, and these are going to be the emotions that your character will pretty much be feeling the entire story. You want to keep track of which ones they have for each one. So for example, if your character's confused, they may have feelings of uncertainty, or they may be shy at a certain situation when they're confused, or they may feel lost. They may become extremely pessimistic. Who knows? When they're sad, they could be very dejected. They could be outright depressed. They can cry. They can get very upset. When they're happy, they could be optimistic. They could feel joyful. They could have strong expressions of love. All sorts of different things. When they're angry, obviously, they'll be mad, but they could also grow very bitter. They could grow resentful. They could be outraged. They could be disgusted. They could be irritated, annoyed, all sorts of different things when they start having certain emotions. Like there's all sorts of feelings that can come with that. You want to kind of keep track of which feelings they'll have for each emotion. Like I said, confusion, sadness, strength, happiness, anger, and energizing. You want to know how they feel for each one of those. And like I said, I didn't go through energizing, but whether or not really revved up, do they feel focused? Do they feel motivated? Do they feel strengthened? Do they feel renewed? Do they feel creative? Do they feel inspired? Things along those lines. You want to know how, when a situation presents itself and the character's in a certain mind space, what emotions are immediately triggered by, or what feelings are immediately triggered by those emotions. And like I said, your character's not going to have all of these, but you need to know which ones they will and will not have in the course of your story. Another very important trait to also keep in mind is whether or not your character is introverted or extroverted. Now, there's a lot of confusion with introverts and extroverts just in society in general anyways. Most people think that extroverts are very outspoken and introverts are very quiet and reserved. This is not the case. The best way that I've known to actually describe an introvert or extrovert is an introvert actually gets going and get their energy from retreating or being isolated, to sort of almost look at it like recharging their batteries by being alone. And an extrovert gets energy from actually being around other people or around a lot of external stimulation. you want to try to not keep in mind, you want to determine whether or not the character you're writing for is introverted or whether they're extroverted. That could also be very big in terms of how your characters may deal with not just the environment around them, but how they interact with other characters. And also, once you start dealing with whether or not your character is an introvert or extrovert, you can start dealing with temperaments. Now, I'm not going to get deep into the 4 temperaments. You can look those up on your own. But basically, when trying to find out your temperament style and the personality traits that come with it, and like I said, this is just expanding upon whether or not they're introverted or extroverted. But whichever side of the coin you put your characters on, if you want to go completely into their temperament style, look up the 4 different temperaments and see exactly which one better suits your character. And then to cap all of this off, you want to try to come up with ideas of what may have been the best thing to ever happen to your character up to the point to where your story's beginning, or hell, maybe you want to think about your entire story and figure out what the best thing was to ever happen to your character. And you also want to think of what is the absolute worst thing to ever happen to your character. As you're figuring little details like this, and I do mean the absolute best thing and the worst. I can't stress that enough. But once you figure that out, you pretty much have a decent enough fleshed out character without getting into stuff like, what color their skin is, what their hair looks like, what is their teeth and shoulders and stuff like. Unless you can come up with a detail that's actually going to be of significance to how that character may look, or is certain problems like they have a damaged body part and somehow that relates to the story, you might want to keep track of those as well. But that may or may not always be necessary depending upon the type of story that you're creating. That's a good base to sort of start with character development right there. And if you know those little things on top of, like I said, just actual physical characteristics in general, you can start to actually piece together your story, with pretty much no other information. It's amazing how when you start to build the main character of your story, everything else will slowly start to fall into place, especially if you can start to make sort of the protagonists of your story and then start to counteract with the antagonists of your story. As you start to imagine your world, as you're creating the details of your main characters in the story, especially your singular main character of the story, if you have just one. I know some people actually do more than one. But once you have that down packed, it's amazing how when you have the mental image of what your world is going to be in the story, dropping your character that you've created in that world or building the world around your character, the story that you're trying to tell and the ideas that you have, it will start to unfold on its own with the more details that you actually provide for your character. The actual character development process of a story cannot be understated enough. So good luck to you in your story and your adventures, making your little comics, artwork, novels, mangas, whatever it is that you're going to work on. More power to you. Let me know what important details that you think that I may have missed, or what do you think is very vital to creating a character in the story is in the comments below. Also, extra details for different types of story that you may need. For example, if you're creating a very action-based manga with or the action-based comic book with superpowers and stuff like that, you may want to know the type of fighting techniques or their approach to battle, essentially. So those might be small things to keep track of. So just little extra character development tips that you may have for different kinds of story would also be interesting to hear. So just let me know what you think in the comments below. But outside of that, go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't. And you all have a good one. And I'm out.